Okay, I'm back with another tier list, and in this tier list, I'm gonna place all the different raids throughout Lotro's history and place them where I feel like they belong. Is it a fun raid? Is it a good raid? Is it a bad raid that I didn't enjoy? We'll see where every raid lands in my tier list. Obviously, S tier is the best and D tier is the worst. Now, it's important to mention that I didn't do every raid on level. I've probably done every raid at some point, but it's kind of going to be like what I think it was like, what I've heard, and I've done the raid, and what do I think about the raid from what I've done, and can I imagine what it was like on level cap. So I'm going to try to do a fair tier ranking from what I think, but if some people think I placed some raids too low or too high, then please let me know in the comments how you felt about the raids, and if they were better than I imagined, or if they were worse than I imagined. So this tier list is already a pre-made tier list that I found on the tier maker website, and it's obviously missing some of the newer raids, so I'm going to tackle the newer raids first. So it seems like we're missing the Fall of Khazad-dûm, where you fight the Balrog. It's missing the Hidden Horde of Abnan-Kara and Gwathronost, the newest raid. And when it comes to the Fall of Khazad-dûm, where we fight the Balrog, I would say that it's probably one of my most favorite raids in this game. Although it's a raid where you only fight one boss, I think it was a great addition to a 130 level cap. Like, we already had a great 130 level cap, and then this came kind of late in the 130. But I think the fight was really interesting and challenging. And of course, I really enjoy when the higher tiers are really hard. I think there were only like 2 groups or so that beat it on tier 5 before the legendary item rework. So that's something that I really enjoy, when the highest tier is super hard, that only a few select people can beat it. But at least from my experience, I had a lot of fun in there on a lot of different classes. And I think the mechanics were fun and engaging. So honestly, the Fall of Khazad-dûm, I would put it on S tier, because I really enjoyed that raid. I don't have images for these first 3 raids. I'm just going to tell you what I would place it. So Fall of Khazad-dûm, definitely S tier for me. Really great raid, and a raid that I really enjoyed. The next raid that came after Fall of Khazad-dûm was the first raid for level 140, the Hidden Horde of Abnan-Kara. The first boss is against the 3 giants, and the 3 giants, I would say, is a pretty meh fight. You just fight 3 giants. There are some mechanics in there, but overall the fight is kind of stale, I would say. So boss 1 probably lands on like a B tier for me against the 3 giants. Then we move on to boss 2, the Stalbuk, and this is probably the best fight in the raid. Although there's a lot of adds for the mechanics, it's still a challenging fight for pretty much every class. There's a lot of mechanics to watch out for. So the Stalbuk as a fight lands between A and S tier for me. And finally we have the Ephemeral fight at the end. Of course, the dreaded Gauntlet. There was a time where you had to kill the Gauntlet every time you attempted the boss fight, which really made the raid unbearable, in my opinion, but that got fixed, of course. Now you only have to do the Gauntlet once. But the Ephemeral fight overall is a bit too long, in my opinion, but it still lands on like an A, B tier for me. The Hidden Horde of Abnan-Kara was a pretty good raid, but honestly, I think it's a bit too ad heavy, and the last boss fight lasts a bit too long for my liking. Like, we've seen kills of boss 3 that's been 50 minutes plus, and that's just way too long. So the Hidden Horde of Abnan-Kara for me lands at a B tier for a raid. Solid raid, but nothing really great. And the final raid without an image is the Gwathronost, the Witch King Citadel, the newest raid that we have right now on live. And boss 1 is a fine gatekeeper raid, although it's probably a little bit easy if your tanks can take the beating, but it's fine for a gatekeeper raid. I'd rather have that instead of less bosses. Having the first boss being a little bit on the easier side is fine in my opinion. Boss 2 of Gwathronost is a really fun fight. A lot of interesting mechanics. There's adds now and then, but it doesn't feel too ad heavy. And I like the set of mechanics that are in this fight. A lot of things to watch out for. If you're careless, you might fill the room with puddles real quickly. And your tanks need to be on their toes. And the group needs to coordinate. I think it's a really engaging and fun fight. So I would say the first boss of Gwathrenos is probably like a C tier, really basic fight. But the second boss is up there with an A tier, kind of going towards S tier. Like, it's a really fun fight in my opinion, but A, S tier for the second boss. And I also like when the enrage timer is really tight, making this a really good fight in my opinion. The third boss, I still think the third boss is pretty good. Although it's a bit on the easier side if you manage to control the ads. It's still a good fight, probably like a B or A tier for me. It is a bit ad heavy, but I think overall the fight makes sense, and it ends up being an enjoyable fight for me for sure. And the final boss of the Gwathrenos raid is against the Shard of Taurisar, and I think this is just another great raid fight, and it becomes even more interesting on higher tiers, tier 4 and 5, where you have the ads that you need to wake up and kill, or they will all wake up in the end and fight against you. So the Shard fight on tier 4 and tier 5, a lot of people have to pull their weight. You can't really... Everyone needs to be doing their job for you to get a successful kill. There's also the soft enrage with the bleed that tears up over time. There is sort of a DPS check with the twins waking up at the end, and just overall a pretty fun and interesting fight in my opinion. So Gwathrenos overall as a raid, I think most people would agree with me. It is a solid A tier raid, very good and solid raid with a couple of really good boss fights. So for the 3 raids in the beginning without images, the Follow Khazad-dûm lands on S tier, Gwathrenos A tier, and Hidden Horde lands on B tier. So we can finally move on to the rest of the raids. You can see at the bottom here, there's quite a few raids to rank. I'm going to scroll up and have the top line visible, so we're just going to go left to right. The first raid is the Rift, and obviously the Rift I didn't do at level cap. I only started doing like endgame at level 75. So the Rift I've only done as an overleveled character. So I can't really accurately place this as a level cap player. But from what I've seen and when I've played through the raid, obviously the raid is really huge. I love a big dungeon raid. And the raid itself just looks great. There's like good storylines, it seems like. And it of course ends with an epic encounter with the Balrog at the end. So I'm assuming that people who play this at level cap for the time, they would definitely put it on S tier. But overall, I think from my experience and everything I've seen, the Rift probably a solid A tier pick. The next raid is the Barad Guldur raid from Mirkwood. And kind of just like the Rift, I've heard a lot of good things about this on level cap. Sounds like a pretty good raid. And it's kind of going to be like the same thing. A lot of people probably enjoy this quite a lot on level, like an S tier enjoyment. But like I said, I didn't play it on level cap. I played through the raid after, and it seems like a pretty fun raid, honestly. So overall, from what I've seen from the Barad Guldur raid, it seems like a solid A tier raid as well, putting it right next to the Rift. Now, this first raid is actually my first multi-boss raid at endgame, the Orthanc raid, and honestly, probably one of my favorite raids of all time. Like at the time, obviously I didn't play a lot of classes. I think I played a hunter, and only a hunter back then, maybe a champion. And I don't think I was that great, but I still had so much fun in the Orthanc raids. And the Saruman fight in particular, with all the colors of the rings and doing them in order, all that stuff. It was really fun and engaging to me, and the other bosses were pretty fun as well. I just remember like the ads towards the boss being really hard as well. So overall, I have really fond memories from the Orthanc raid. And honestly, for me, the overall feel of the Orthanc raid, the first boss with the 2 giant twins, second boss or third boss, I can't remember if they had an order, where you had the acid boss where you have to jump around when the acid arose. It was pretty fun. There was this lightning boss with all the chaining of the lightning bolts, whatever. Boss 4 with the shadow creeping in. And then of course you had the Saruman fight with all the different colored rings. I just have good memories from all these fights. I think they were all fun. The loot was fun and engaging to get. And also I love when a raid has more than 4 bosses. I actually had 5 bosses. So for me personally, Orthanc gets an S tier. I have so many good memories from this raid that I will put it on S tier. OD is the next raid, also Dunhoth, level 65 raid. And honestly, I've heard so many good things about the OD raid. People loved this raid, the fight with the Balrog. But here I run into the same problem where I didn't play at 65 at endgame, but I've heard really great things. It's gonna be the same thing as Rift and BG, where the OD raid goes into A tier. And honestly, if I played these raids at the time, I might have put them on S tier from what I've heard from different people. People really enjoyed these raids. But like I said, I can't make a super accurate judgment of them, so A tier is where I'm gonna put them. The next raid is the level 105 Throne of the Dread Terror, so I'm just gonna put it right up here right away. 6 boss raid, level 105. Quite possibly the best time I had with raiding in this game is the Throne of the Dread Terror raid. Boss 1 was Rakathas. Pretty simple fight, but also a lot of ways to mess it up. But still a fun boss 1 to kill. Boss 2 with all the 3 different Muma kills, the huge arena. There were so many different strategies being used. I remember doing it in so many different ways. So there was a lot of fun figuring out that boss fight. Boss 3 was also fun with, what's his name, Vadokar, I think, where it was kind of a DPS raise, and if you had a lot of morale, it was actually a detriment to your group, so a really fun fight there as well. Boss 4, the Unbroken One, was by far the hardest boss in the raid. Doing that on challenge is what gatekept most people for getting a full completion for such a long time, but honestly, the Unbroken One, the fight itself, probably one of the best designed boss fights I've ever seen, with the pull, the different Darkling ads coming in, the different effects of the main boss and the 3 different bosses, how to remove the corruptions from the boss. Just an excellent fight in my opinion. Boss 5 with the Nazgul twins, also a lot of fun, where you kind of had to control the fight and kill them at the same time for the challenge mode. And there was also the enraged worms coming in that you had to control. Just a really fun fight overall. And the last fight where you fight against the Gothmog with the long gauntlet with different challenges in it. I just found it to be a really fun and engaging fight. And the final encounter with Gothmog with kind of like a DPS check and also requiring movement and coordination. Just a great fight overall. Throne of the Dread Terror, probably the most fun I've ever had in this game in raiding. The next raid is the Dar Norbugud raid. The level 60, I believe, like a Moria Lothlorien raid. And this kind of falls into the category of the Rift. It's a really big raid, and the atmosphere is really great. And the boss fights, I think, for their time, looked really fun and engaging as well. But same problem for me, I didn't really play. But from what I've seen when I've played it, what I can imagine it being and how people were enjoying it, it sounds like it was another A tier raid, taking the place next to the Rift, OD, and BG. Next up, we have the Filicule raid, the Turtle fight, single boss raid fight. And obviously, me personally, I've only played this where it's like really easy and you just go in there and one-shot the boss, kind of. But on level, I feel like it was pretty hard. But I haven't really heard anyone praise this fight like, oh, it's so good, what a great raid. It's probably going to be a B or C tier raid. And due to my lack of knowledge of the endgame at the time, I'm just going to place it at a neutral B tier. It seemed like a solid raid, but not the greatest. Speaking of the greatest, I think this next raid fight was more fun for a single boss fight. The Vile Maw, where you fight the Watcher in the water. Obviously, once again, I did this when it was a lot easier than it was back then. But it seems like a fun and engaging single boss fight. And I'm assuming it was probably pretty hard. You probably needed a solid group. So the Vile Maw seems to me like it's definitely more fun than the Filicule raid. So I'm going to put it on the A tier ranking. The next raid is the Helagrod raid. And right now the Helagrod is split into different wings. And I believe the Dragon Wing was a 24 raid at some point. But I run into the same issues that I never really got to do this on level. Obviously it now scales up to the max level. But from what I've heard and seen, some people really enjoyed it, some people didn't. It's gonna just land on a neutral B tier for now. Next raid, Anvil of Winterstith, is actually a raid that I've done on level. The level 120 raid. Boss 1 was Isvata was a really hard gatekeeper boss. Probably should have been the last boss, but I guess it doesn't make sense in the storyline because we get to fight Hrimul at the end. But boss 1, I have really fond memories of. Really hard fight, but also fun and engaging. Although it was really punishing to be a melee player back then. So not a lot of fun for wardens and champions. But the fight in itself was pretty fun in my opinion. Boss 2 with the 13 kings was also a pretty fun fight, and I also liked the idea that every week they rotated, so you got different mechanics every week. That's something I can really appreciate in a raid fight. Boss 3 with Karasgar and Vetug, I believe it was not the most engaging fight, but it was still a solid fight in my opinion. And the last fight against Hrimul was also pretty fun. And I also remember the ice breaking and you fall down. You have to kill both Grims at the end of the, let's call it the path that you run to try to escape from Hrimul. And then you finally make it out and escape Hrimul's wrath. Overall, I think Anvil of Winterstith was a pretty solid raid, but it was probably a tad too easy in my opinion. I did appreciate that there's 4 bosses, but overall in my opinion, boss 1 was great, boss 2 was good, boss 3 was meh, and boss 4 was pretty good, I would say. But Anvil doesn't quite get up there to S tier or A tier for me. My overall ranking of Anvil would be B tier. So Anvil of Winterstith, almost an A tier raid for me, but definitely sits atop of B tier. Next up we have Dragog's Lair, level 75 raid alongside the Saruman. This is probably my own bias as well. I really enjoyed the atmosphere in this raid. I really enjoyed the fight as well. It's just fun to be in a big arena fighting a giant dragon. A lot of different movement and coordinations. You have to do all the combos with the CJs when the boss fell down. And I just remember having a great time in doing this raid. Dragog, in my opinion, is definitely A tier, but my own personal enjoyment is gonna put it on bottom of S tier. Really enjoyed that raid. Really enjoyed Dragog. I really wish they would scale all the raids and make them mean something. Like, they don't have to give the greatest of rewards, but give us a meaning to run all the different raids in the game. There's so many great raids. That's like one of my dreams, that they would scale all the raids. The next raid is the Flight to the Lonely Mountain. This was one of the Erebor raids at level 85, and honestly these raids combined with the big battles is what made me take a long break until level 100. But the Flight of the Lonely Mountain, I just remember a bunch of ads coming at you, fighting a bunch of ads. Not really the best and most fun raid mechanics in the world. Some people might enjoy these raids more than I did, but the Flight to the Lonely Mountain, I'm just going to put it on D tier. I hated it, did not enjoy. It's probably more accurately like a C or B tier raid, but my personal memories with this raid is not great. D tier for me. The Deeping Wall Big Battle Raid. Now where would I put this raid? This actually isn't that bad. I kind of enjoyed this compared to most big battles, but it just being a big battle definitely pulls it down a bit for me. From what I've seen and heard, and from my own playing, it's not the worst raid I've ever seen. Like, I'm not gonna put it on C tier because it's definitely not that bad. I think a B tier for Deeping Wall is pretty fair, a pretty fair judgment of that raid. Next up, we have the Remerkant level 130 raid. And on boss 1, we had rotating spider bosses, different elements every week. Boss 2 was a really fun DPS check against Thossalon. Boss 3 was a great fight against Rukor, a lot of mechanics to watch out for, a lot of coordination and movement required. And boss 4, I really enjoyed the Shelob fight. Such a good fight to rinse and repeat, keep farming for those bracelets. Remerkant overall, I have really good memories, really good raid. For me personally, Rem definitely goes into S tier. Such a great raid to play. Does it surpass the other S tier raids? Definitely better than Dragog, in my opinion. Outranks the Orthanc raid for me, because back at 75 I wasn't that great of a player, only played like one class. I had more fun overall with the Remerkant raid, Nothing is going to beat Throne though for me in terms of memories and the boss fights with different challenges. Please bring back challenge mode, makes the fights so much more fun. But Rem, I definitely enjoyed Rem a lot. Pretty much all the boss fights were really fun and enjoyable. Maybe boss 1 was a bit on the more meh side, but boss 2 was really fun, especially with the DPS check. To beat the Thossalon with one of the ads dying on top of her. Rukor, I think, was an excellent fight. I had a lot of fun leading and calling out the mechanics, calling out to double dip into the protective shield puddle. Just a great fight overall in my opinion, with DPS checks as well. And Shelob, I don't have to say much, really fun fight, a lot of ads, but burning the ads was also like a fun mechanic, so everybody needs to be on their toes. Just a really fun and great raid. The atmosphere is great, the raid design is great, there were side bosses as well. Just a really great raid in my opinion, definitely S tier material. Next up we have another of the Road to Erebor raids, the Fires of Smog. And just like the Flight to the Lonely Mountain, I wasn't really that fond of this raid, but at least it's not just mindlessly fighting a bunch of ads, so I think this was a little bit better. So the Fires of Smog goes into C tier for me. Obviously there might be people who played these on level and like really engaged with the mechanics and stuff, who found them really fun, but for me they were not fun at all. The third fight in the Road of Erebor's raid, the Battle for Erebor, where you fight the two trolls, you can actually select which two mechanics you wanted to be part of the fight. There were like 6 flags or something, where you could select the different mechanics. And although I like that kind of mechanic, you always pretty much fall down to a meta on which are the 2 easiest mechanics to fight against. Do you want the ads? Do you want the catapults? Do you want, like, there's different types of mechanics you can select. But this fight is probably at least the best fight out of the 3, and it probably makes its way up into B tier, so definitely a B tier raid, the Battle for Erebor. I'm just gonna put it in the middle of B tier. A pretty solid raid, but not the greatest. The next raid that we have is the Abyss of Mordath. So this is the level 115 raid that we got with the Mordor expansion. And I would say that this raid is when I really learned how to raid, like really got into learning how raiding works, how debuffing works, how like combining your buffs makes everything better. So I do have really fond memories of the Abyss of Mordath, because this is kind of, I don't know, weird to say, but this is where I learned my trade as a raider and just got better at the game. But if I'm to judge the raid fairly, boss 1 was pretty fun. The 2 Nazguls that you fight and the side bosses that enter the fight after a while, you had to kill them in the water for the challenge, and you had to CJ them at the end before you kill them or something. There were some different mechanics to look out for there. Boss 2 I think was also really fun. A fun and engaging DPS check, and the tank that had to pick up the ads had to work really hard. I really enjoyed that fight on Guardian, picking up all the ads that came into the fight. And you also had to heal the spirit up for the challenge mode. So I think boss 2 was a pretty fun raid experience. And boss 3 against Fingar runs into the same problems as the Hidden Horde raid, in my opinion. The last boss fight is way too long. The coins that boop you around are super annoying and not fun at all. And you basically shut down your brain for like 15 minutes and then you get to the final part with the dwarves. So the last boss definitely drags down the raid quite a bit for me. Like overall, before the last boss, it's probably like a solid B or A tier raid. But the last boss being so annoying and lasting so long drags the Abyss of Mordath down to C tier for me, unfortunately. A lot of good memories from Abyss, but the Fingar fight is not a good design in my opinion, dragging the Abyss down to C tier. And the last raid I'm gonna rank is the Amdan Damul, the Bloody Threshold. So this was the second out of 3 raids in the 130 cap, and Amdan Damul had only 2 boss fights. So kind of like a smaller raid where you fight 2 bosses in the same arena. Boss 1 was fighting, I don't remember his name, this big troll looking creature right there. And boss 1 was It was okay. You needed good DPS. There were some mechanics to look out for. Boss 1 was probably like a solid B tier fight. Boss 2 was a little bit more fun, like a B A tier for sure. There's nothing that screams S tier from Amdan Damul for me, but it wasn't the worst raid I've ever seen. So Amdan Damul is probably one of the more mid raids we've ever seen in this game. It's not bad, it's not great. It's okay, it's good, it's like a B tier raid. I'm just gonna place it straight down the middle here in B tier. And that concludes my ranking of the Lotro raids. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the videos, there are 3 raids that aren't showing right now. Just gonna go through all the raids real quick and see where I place them, mention it real quick. The best raids in my opinion, Throne of the Dread Terror, and up here is probably where I would put like Fall of Khazad-dûm. The Fall of Khazad-dûm raid, probably like Throne, Remerkant level, Remerkant, Orthanc, Dragok, and Fall of Khazad-dûm are all S tiers. Some of the best raids produced in this game for sure. In the A tier category are like a lot of raids that I didn't play on level, but that I've heard really great things about from other players. The Rift raid, OD, BG, DN, and the Watcher raid. I should also mention that I placed the Guathranos raid in A tier as well. I think the latest raid in Lotro is a really good raid, definitely A tier for me. And then we have the B tier list where I did place the Hidden Horde of Abnankara. That's not on a picture here, but Hidden Horde, the same goes for Anvil, Filicule, Battle for Erebor, Amdan Damul, Elagrod, and the Deeping Wall. They are all like solid mid-tier raids in my opinion. Abyss of Mordor and the Fires of Smog, not impressive for me, definitely C tier. And Flight to the Lonely Mountain, if there was a lower tier, I would probably place it lower. But the Flight to the Lonely Mountain is like the opposite of what I want from a raid. Just ads storming at you constantly is not a fun raid to me. So, what do people think about my tier list? Is it accurate? I feel like I did a pretty good job. At least there's like maybe some people think Filicule should be higher, some people think Rift should be higher. But I don't think I missed majorly on any raids. Like, I don't think I put anything in S tier that should be like C tier, or anything in like D tier that should be A tier. Like, I don't think I missed by a lot. I think this is a pretty fair tier list in my opinion. Let me know in the comments if you agree with some of my picks, if you really disagree with some of my picks. And thank you for watching my video. Hey! Hey you! Yeah you! What do you want? You enjoy my content and you want to support me? Fine, I'll show you how you can do it. I would really appreciate if you like the video and subscribe to my channel. You can also support me through my Ko-fi homepage. If you're playing or looking to play Lord of the Rings online, there is one place you need to be. The Ghyniverse is a Discord server created for the community of the players of Lord of the Rings Online. The server is getting close to 7,000 members, and in this server you'll find tons of helpful information. There's monthly giveaways, easy access to patch notes, you can keep up with my YouTube videos, my streams. If you're a streamer, you can ask for the streamer role and you can announce your streams in the other stream channel. There are discussion channels for pretty much everything, every class, monster players. But the best thing about this server is probably the Gearing Resources tab, where you can find anything from trait lines for every class, every build. There are stat goals, where you can find out what stats you should aim for on your characters. Really helpful information about drop rates from instances, as well as screenshot from all the new loot that appears in the game. If you enjoy Lotro, you should definitely consider joining this server, and hopefully I'll see you in Middle Earth. If you were part of the Ghyniverse already, you might have noticed that another tab appeared at the top, the LFF server. This server is a brand new server that I created, the LFF Ghyniverse. In this server, you can select which servers you want to keep up with, and once you select your server, say you select Arkenstone, you will see the LFF, the kinship advertisement, looking for kinship and trade channels, And there's also voice channels if people want to use those. The LFF channel is basically a looking for fellowship channel where people can post if they need players for the runs. And this way people don't have to be logged into the game to see the chat, they can just instead get a notification on their Discord. There's also a kinship advertisement page where kins can post their kinship advertisement and have people join their kins. And you can also post in the looking for kinship chat if you're looking for a kinship, but make sure to take a look in the kinship advertisement first and look through all the kin to find a suitable kin for you. There's also a trade channel if people want to buy or sell stuff that you can use. Hopefully you'll consider joining this server to bring the community even more together, not just in the game, but also outside of the game.